Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Funding for Commercialization panel today. First and foremost, my name is Katie Hemphill, and I'm Director of Tech Ventures and Talent Network at the Center for Research Innovation here at Northeastern. I am co-hosting this panel with the College of Engineering and the Kostas Research Institute. So thank you so much to our co-hosts for helping us facilitate this panel this morning. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our 4 panelists joining today. First, we have Sarah Rohanaford. She's Assistant Professor of Bioengineering and co-founder of Viral NPQ. Next, we have Yi Zhang, who's Associate Professor of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering and founder and president of Planck Energies. Next, we have Randy Erb, Associate Professor of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering and co-founder of Boston Materials, Fortify, and Fourier Technical Ceramics. And last but not least, we have Tom Vanek, CEO and Director of the Kostas Research Institute. Today, we're here to share more about funding for commercialization. So this is how we take our research from labs here at Northeastern out into the world to make most impact. Without further ado, I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to our panelists so that they can provide a brief overview of what it is they're going to bring to today's conversation. And then we're going to hop right into the panel discussion. Sarah, I'm going to hand this virtual microphone over to you first.
Okay, hi, thanks for the introduction. I'm Sarah Rohanaford. I'm an assistant professor in bioengineering. So we're a very new company started called Viral NPQ. I'm one of the co-founders. Just very briefly, we're interested in developing devices to quantify viruses. So what I bring to the table is that we started off this venture with Spark funding, and now we've moved to non-dilutive funding, including the PFI TT track, and now we're thinking about doing STTR next.
Fabulous, thanks, Sarah. Yi, I'm going to have you take over next.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Yi Zhang. I'm a social professor at MIE department. And I founded my own startup company named Planck Energies last April. It's been 1.5 years new. And we started our company without any funding. And a few months later, actually, we received a Spark Fund. So thanks, CRI, for supporting actually our business, our technology. And also we also received NSF-PFI TT track funding in the beginning of this year. And these days we are actively looking for all type of funding, including dilutive and non-dilutive funding. And also I serve as a founder and a president, and one of my PhD students, is serving as the CEO of my company right now. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Yi. Randy, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, it sounds good. My name is Randy Erb, a faculty member in the MIE department. I have 3 companies that spun out from my lab at various stages. Fortify is focused on filled photoresin systems, a 3D printing company located here in downtown Boston. The CEO just transferred there from my student who held it for 6 years. In addition, Boston Materials was founded with Anvesh and Mike, 2 NEU alum. That is located just north of Boston and focused on continuous fiber composites and a specialty of Z-axis carbon fiber. And the third is a very new company founded with my recent PhD graduate, Jason Bice. Fourier Technical Ceramics is focused on thermal management solutions and a new technology of thermoformable ceramics that we discovered in lab.
Great, thanks, Randy. And Tom, would you introduce yourself last?
Hi, good morning. Tom Vanek. I am the CEO of CRI LLC and director of the Kostas Research Institute here at Northeastern. Prior to assuming this role, I was vice president of AeroVironment, where I stood up and ran an organization called AV Ventures. It was an organization where we invested in ourselves in new technology, new product development, prior to taking that out for public dissemination. Prior to AeroVironment, and I think of potential interest here, I founded a company called Instant Eye Robotics. We started with a phase 1 SBIR and grew it into a $20 million company and we enjoyed 43% gross margins, ran that for about 11 years.
Thanks so much, Tom. So get excited, folks. We have a solid panel here today to talk about funding for commercialization. To begin the conversation, we'd like to set the stage a bit with the difference between dilutive and non-dilutive funding. We do have plenty of folks on the call that have received both and or are working towards both. So with that, Randy, I'm going to hand this virtual mic over to you to talk a bit about what dilutive funding means for a company versus non-dilutive funding.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. To set us up here, the real definition with dilutive is if you're willing to get money for equity, and dilutive funding helps in a certain number of ways. It leads to really fast growth. In general, it's important to understand your minimum viable product, your MVP, and your market fit before you take on dilutive funding. Dilutive funding is essentially pouring lighter fluid on the fire, and growth will come fast and expectations rise quite a bit. With non-dilutive funding, it makes a lot more sense to look towards non-dilutive funding to go after technical milestones that still have risk in the way of your minimum viable product on the market. And non-dilutive funding opportunities include things like small business grants, SBIRs from NSF, from DOE, from DOD, and others, as well as here special to the Northeastern community. There is a big entrepreneurship focus and a lot of opportunities for non-dilutive funding from the Spark Fund and beyond in order to take on some of those early technical milestones, de-risk your storyline, and set you up for long-term success.
Thanks, Randy. And Tom, as it relates to non-dilutive, is there anything else you'd like to add as we're setting the stage, and kind of defining what it is non-dilutive versus dilutive means?
Well, and I've had both. Randy pretty much nailed it. One thing that I'd like to bring up right from the start is anytime that you think about dilutive funding, you're giving away part of the ownership of your organization. And there's a lot of folks that think that's a very bad idea, and it is not. You can get a lot of value beyond just the capital that can be put into the organization to grow it rapidly. With the right kind of organization partnering with you, it gives you knowledge about how you're going to distribute your products, how you're going to put it into the market. You're basically getting experts on your team. They want to see you succeed because they are part owners as well. So it can be a great way to rapidly accelerate a program. On the non-dilutive, the grants, you can also do loans. There are a variety of ways that you can obtain the equity without diluting your ownership in the organization. That's typically done with very early stage organizations as they're getting to a point where they have demonstrated that the commercialization path is there, the productization path is there, and a more mature understanding of the markets you're going to be going into.
Great, thank you. So to begin the conversation, now that we've set the stage, I'd like to talk a bit about these non-dilutive avenues, especially available through Northeastern. And Randy, Sarah, Eni, I know you've all received the Center for Research Innovation's Spark Fund Award. And so what I'd love for you to do briefly is just share with the audience what that $50,000 kind of enabled for you and your lab here at Northeastern to bring your research that much closer to commercialization. So prior to hopping in here, I'm just going to set the stage in that the Spark Fund is a non-dilutive grant opportunity through Northeastern. It gives researchers an opportunity to receive $50,000 per year to advance a tech towards commercialization ready, right? So if you have something in your lab that you've been working on that you believe can make real world impact, but you need to hit some major technical milestones prior to having that happen, this is what the Spark Fund helps facilitate. So Randy and you have an active Spark Fund award going right this moment. And I know, Sarah, you've had one in the past. So I'd love to open the floor to you three to talk a bit about what the Spark Fund award helped enable. And I'm also going to put more information about the Spark Fund in the chat right now, because applications are open. So in the event you want to explore potentially applying, they're open at this moment, and the deadline for final applications is Wednesday, November 23rd. So with that, Randy, I see you're off mute. Do you want to talk a bit about your Spark Fund award and what it's enabled?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll go on mute from now. The idea of the Spark Fund for us, $50,000 in a really early stage company is a big deal. It really opens you up to bring in a employee. Our employee is, of course, a student member of Northeastern, but that allows you to hit the technical milestones that are just beyond the impact paper you published, and are really the questions that you're going to be asked when you talk to your first customers, when you talk to potential investors. So it is enabling you to bring your science, your research science from a paper to a product. And it's going to be an early product, and it's going to be a product that isn't fully formulated, doesn't understand the entire landscape of the voice of customer and everything. But what we've done with this is our thermoformable ceramic. We've explored additional chemistries that will speak better to the market that we've started to focus on after performing a lot of voice of customer research. We were in the I-Core program and had lots of these conversations, understood that we had to tweak our chemistry, not something that would be an impact publication, but is critical to that minimum viable product.
Great, thank you. Do you want to share a bit about your Spark Fund project and what the fund's enabled?
Yeah, sure. So I received the Spark Fund actually last year, and starting of this year. It's been actually 1 year project, and currently we're in the second half. So to those of you who have not applied for Spark Fund, I just want to share some information with you. Spark Fund actually is really good money, for the startup companies at a really early stage, or even though you haven't have funded your startup company, if you have your invention disclosure filed, it can be actually something you should think of to file the Spark Fund. And Spark Fund, one thing actually keep in mind is you cannot charge any of the money to the faculty summer salary. And as I know, actually, maybe this can be charged to the teaching faculty, teaching faculty summer salary, but actually to the tenure track professor, you're not allowed actually to charge anything. This is something you need to keep in mind. But the good thing is there's no overhead. This is $50,000 actually is real money. Actually, it's going to split actually into two halves: the first 6 months and then the second. And you are able to to spend actually this money on material supplies and also on the student the payment, and this a lot. And also I want to share some information with you, so currently in our startup company Plunk Energies, our products are organic fiber based, some cooling films or cooling paint. So we funded our company last year, and then we just would like to commercialize or develop this product from the lab scale to large scale. So without the funding, we are not able to do that. And I know some senior faculties who may not have their startup funding at all. So Spark Fund can be quite useful to develop this product out of the lab. So it's really hard to say to commercialize or to develop your technology from in-lab to out of lab, but at least it can help you to develop your technology from lab scale to pilot scale or even larger scale. With the use of the Spark Fund. Spark Fund, and another beauty of the Spark Fund is actually we can use the Spark Fund to pay your students for their summer salaries. On your own business, on your own startup company, or on your own technology. Some of the faculties who may have their your active funding from NSF, or some other federal agencies, for all of those fundings, you are not allowed actually to use those funding, any penny of those funding, to support your own business. But Spark Fund, actually, you could do that. For example, actually, in the past summer, I used the Spark Fund to pay one of my PhD students for 3 months for their summer salary. So students can focus on developing of our product technology, and those part of the development can be directly transited into the final products through the Spark Fund. That's actually the beauty of the Spark Fund. Well,
Thank
thanks.
you. Yes, absolutely. And then Sarah, what I'd love for you to do for us is share a bit about how the Spark Fund enabled your research, but then what did you do post Spark Fund? How did you then take this non-dilutive funding from Northeastern and use it, to kind of apply for further non-dilutive funding and bring your company forward?
Yeah, happy to. So I know the others on the panel mentioned that they started with a paper and then moved into the Spark Fund. Our path was a little bit different. We didn't have the paper yet. We had the idea, and I'm an assistant professor. I had kind of recently started when we got the Spark funding. So we had this project was a side project. We had done regional I-Corps and got some ideas that there's actually a market fit for the product that we were developing. So when we got the Spark funding, there were a couple things that happened. One, when you apply for it, you have to make a pitch deck and then actually pitch it to a bunch of people. And when we pitched it to a bunch of people, we got really good feedback during that kind of interview process, which gave us more confidence that, oh, okay, we really need to do this. And then getting that influx of money was really important to us because, like I said, we had funded this from my startup, like as an assistant professor. So it was as a side project, we were kind of hobbling along. So having that influx of money for us, we were able to not be so timid about testing the idea, actually pushing it forward. So it actually turned into a real project with people assigned to it. We were buying things for it. So this actually turned it into a real project for us. So once we finished with the Spark funding, so the pitch deck was super helpful to us. And also there's a written requirement. It's been a couple of years, actually. I don't recall what the written requirement was, but that written requirement ended up being very helpful for when we applied for other funding sources like the PFI. It kind of makes the barrier to it, like any grant you're writing has some barriers. You have a lot of things you need to put on that page. So when we had this document already written, we used that as a template for when we shifted into the PFI TT funding request. So that was super helpful to us, having something written in the first place, having good feedback on it from a group of people that we didn't know. I think the people on that, I actually don't recall who the people are on the panel that judge you for the Spark, but they seem to be from industry, from all sorts of different sectors of industry, and they were asking questions that gave us the confidence that we need to move forward on this. So having that written document was very helpful to us when we applied for the PFI funding.
That's great. Thank you. So to clarify, when you apply for the Spark Fund, you do have to give us a 3-page executive summary. That executive summary needs to be focused on your commercialization path to impact, not your research. We'd love to hear a bit about your research as well, but a lot of it is about the project and your path to impact, right? What is your commercialization avenue and value that this project is going to help you explore further, right? So that's what the Spark Fund enables, and that's what we look for in these applications. So it's a 3-page executive summary. It's a pitch deck, as Sarah said, right? That's kind of the written requirements. And then if you were selected as a finalist, you're going to receive feedback regardless of whether or not you're selected as a finalist. So everyone receives written feedback as part of their Spark Fund application. When you apply, you are going to be handed a letter kind of post awards that tells you what did and did not go well about your application and what you might improve on in the future. As it relates to the finalist presentations, you do get in front of between generally about 8 and 12 judges live, virtual. It's all virtual presentations, but you do get in front of about 8 to 12 judges live. And these judges do range from industry to VC and, kind of professional capital partners. So they will be asking real world questions because they've seen companies in this space before. We do our best to get those folks in seats for these virtual presentations to ensure that you're really asked relevant questions and provided with relevant feedback, and we are given the information we need to determine who does and does not receive a Spark Fund award that cycle. So that's a bit more information about the process and how that works. So Sarah, I would love for you and Yi now to talk a bit about your experience with PFITT, because you've both received those awards and now you're both pursuing further government funding, right, through the National Science Foundation and other mechanisms. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about, what those awards have enabled, what's been really great about those processes, and what's been a bit of a struggle about those processes as well, right? What did you find kind of fulfilling and not easy, but okay to kind of work through, and what was more difficult to work through, because part of what we're doing is, as part of this panel discussion, is really preparing folks to partake in these kinds of opportunities in the future. So Sarah, do you want to continue on, kind of your train of thought as it relates to PFITT, and then Yi, do you want to follow up what Sarah has to say? Okay.
Sounds good. So PFITT, we shopped around a lot to try to find the right non-dilutive funding to go for next. We wanted to level up from, the $50K that we got from the Spark Fund. We weren't quite ready to do an SBIR or an STTR because those require the formation of a company. So PFITT does not require the formation of a company, and that was really why we went for this. And I don't regret it. I'm about to tell you that it was kind of a pain, but I don't regret it. I still recommend that has to be the next step for most people after the Spark funding, unless you're ready to actually form the company. So PFITT is, I think it's $250K over 2 years, but it has a national I-Corps requirement. That's one thing, which I'll tell you about in a second. The other requirement that it has is that you have something called an industry mentor, which is part of your, it's a required component of this application package. And this was really hard for us. So the industry mentor needs to participate in National I-Corps with you. And National I-Corps is online for the time being. I think eventually it might move to in person, but it's online. It's a huge time requirement. It's kind of like 3 or 4 weeks of your life that full time you need to dedicate to this. And they take attendance. So all members of the team need to be present for this time period. And you need to do a lot of interviews. It's actually a full-time job for all 4 people at that time, including the industry mentor. So getting an industry mentor, ideally you have this connection already, but this is kind of complicated for a new venture. So the industry mentor, they need to be helping you with commercialization, like some kind of thought partner, and they need to have this 3 weeks available that they're going to participate in I-Corps with you. So for us, what it ended up being was we hired a consultant that we knew who could consult with us about commercialization. We ended up having to budget them in and have them participate in I-Corps. Now, participate, I'm going to use that word loosely. They logged into the Zoom, didn't really participate. So we were kind of on our own. And I think a lot of people, I've heard from others that they've had this experience as well, but finding that industry mentor is very difficult. Finding someone who is willing to sit on that call with you every day with their Zoom video on for 3 weeks is very difficult. So what you end up doing is paying for someone to sit there for weeks with you during I-Corps and not help, is kind of our experience with it. That said, I-Corps is a very interesting program. You learn a ton about your market fit. I don't regret doing it, but it was a lot more work than I originally thought it was going to be. So those are kind of my initial thoughts about the PFITT.
Yes, and also I could follow up, on the PFITT fund. I received this PFI fund actually at the beginning of this year from the past April. It's going to be a 2-year funding, and also I can share you. So what does the PFITT mean? PFI is a NSF program, the Partnership for Innovation program. This belongs to NSF, and this PFI program has 2 tracks. So one track named the TT track is the for technology transition track. Usually, it offer fund up to $250,000, up to 24 months, up to 2 years. The other track, the second track, the other track is named the RP track. RP track is named the Research Partnership track. It comes with funding no more than $550,000, no more than 36 months. So the 3-year funding. And to me, this TT track just analogous or equivalent is similar to the phase 1 fund of the SBR fund. And the RP track is just like in the phase 2 fund. This is like phase 2 of the SBR fund or STTR, this fund. And my personal experience, was I submitted my NSF PFI RP track for the first time, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I requested $550,000 for 3 years. And also, just like Sarah mentioned, actually, it took me a while actually to find actually proper industrial partner. And actually, I found one actually who is another clean tech solar energy in San Jose, California. So we submitted a proposal actually 2 years ago, and the review actually didn't, come really well. Maybe because we lack of experience, and also we didn't show too much on the commercialization. To me, the PI5 program, they like to see really detailed commercialization and your strategy, how to commercialize your technology, in details a lot. And after our PI5 RP proposal got declined 2 years ago, almost actually more than 1 year ago, so we just decided to resubmit the proposal. So this time we just resubmit actual proposal to the TT track, technology transition track, the phase 1 track to me. And to be honest, actually we didn't make many changes at all. So actually I almost submit actually maybe 95% actually the same proposal. I simply just reduced my budget from $550,000 to $250,000. And after 4 or 5 months in the review, we just got it without any question at all. So this is something I want to share with you. This is my personal experience. If you think of, to request this non-dilutive funding from PFI, maybe it's better to start with, the TT, even though the program manager does not require that. But my idea is you could actually think of to start with a TT track, and then if everything is doing well, within 2 years, you could actually think of requesting more funding, just like PFI RP track. And another thing I want to mention to you, Sarah also mentioned that the only difference to me before the NSF PI5 program and SBR program is it does not require you to fund your company if you request the PI5 funding. For SBR programs, NSF, DOE, or DAPA, Air Force, actually they all require you have your own company. Actually, we may discuss something about that later, but this is only difference. But the thing is that you have to be really careful about what, if you already funded your company, like what I did, and then when you look for an industrial partner who might actually have to be able to supervise you, advise you, or consult on some technology, you have to be really careful about your technology. You must sign the NDA and make sure how do you split some research works with your industrial mentor. Research mentor will get on board. Actually, they will supervise your technology development and your prototype development. And if you haven't found your startup company, it is totally fine, and you can maybe do whatever you want, and you can get a lot of super suggestions. But like my company, I already found my company, and I didn't plan to really work with my industrial partner or industrial mentor. So you have to be really careful. So how deep you will work with them, you will propose to collaborate with them. This is something. And also another thing is through my PFI funding, I also received a 5-year-long funding through my industrial mentor. That definitely raised some red flags. But actually, the company, they were really generous. They liked the idea. They liked the technology I proposed. They said, actually, okay, Professor Yi Zheng, actually, I like to give you some funding. So they found actually they give to me actually to support my research, 5-year-long research. Actually, there's more than PFI TT track, but this can be something tricky. So if any technology you developed, through this industrial funding, you might have to share something, at least your patent. You might have to co-invent a technology with the business, the company. But it all depends on the agreement you sign actually between university and the industry. But it's also something to share with you. This is my personal experience I have.
Thanks, Yi and Sarah. That's fabulous kind of insight there. And yes, IP is important. And sometimes you share IP if you do get involved with other people. That said, Randy and Tom, I'd like to now kind of transition the conversation over to other forms of funding available, right? So I know, Randy, you can kind of speak to corporate consulting and working with industry partners. Tom, you may be able to do the same here. So I'd like to kind of transition the conversation now from focused on National Science Foundation PFI awards more to maybe these larger SBIR awards, once you've incorporated the company, what this looks like in addition to other forms of funding, whether that be corporate consulting, dilutive funding through professional capital partners. Take us there.
Yeah, sounds good, Katie. We'll jump in. The journeys that Fortify and Boston Materials took were pretty different, even though they were both through the dilutive funding track. Both had NSF SBIR phase 1 and then phase 2 follow-ons. And the process of the I-Corps was really good to understand voice of customer and ensure that we had the right go-to-market product, that minimum viable product. And with Boston Materials, we had kind of a unique opportunity. We were really deep diving thermal management. We were deep diving battery pack solutions. And on KRI, in that ecosystem that KRI has created on our Burlington campus, we were rubbing shoulders with other companies there that were also interested in these problems. And, we were spending a lot of time becoming thought leaders there and developing more kind of a holistic knowledge set. And so we've found a route where we can act as corporate consultants. That is another non-dilutive mechanism there. We can act as corporate consultants, not share our inventions or secret sauce or ambitions, but share the knowledge of the space with these company partners. And in that way, we buoyed ourselves, figured a way to pay rent on lab space, push forward our product. With that, we were able to, be successful at that NSF phase 1. And we were also able to, develop our story enough to understand where we wanted to go, identify that we were indeed in a capital intensive business, and that dilutive funding made sense for Boston Materials at that time. And with that journey through corporate consulting, we were able to learn enough so that we knew what to accelerate.
That's great. Thank you, Randy. Tom, do you want to speak a bit to, more about other avenues for funding, but also potentially share a bit about the Kostas Research Institute, as Randy just gave it quite a shout out here as it relates to Boston Materials. So maybe share with folks what it is, the Institute is about, the Venture Creation Center, and how being co-located with some of these larger industry partners is helpful.
Yeah, I'll speak to that, and then also talk a little bit about SBIR, STTR, because I have quite a bit of familiarity with that. So at Kostas, we are really divided into two separate organizations. One is the Research Institute, which is a research institute with the university. The other is KRI LLC. The reason that the LLC, it's wholly owned by Northeastern, was stood up was some of our customers, especially with the Department of Defense, some of the work that we do is classified. It is difficult to do that in a university environment, so we stood up the LLC to be able to do that classified work. In almost all of the contracts that we have partner organizations that we team with in order to solve these big problems. And through those partner organizations where we're reaching out to industry, bringing industry partners in who collaborate with us to solve problems, and also government, we're able to get the voice of the customer, to get collaborators who fill out our ability and our capabilities so that we can solve the problems. The great thing about our industry partners is not only are they teaming with us and going after CRAD, contract research and development efforts, but they're also internal to those organizations. They have wants and needs for technology development or technology acceleration, where they understand that teaming with KRI personnel or all the way through to Northeastern and faculty, that they can get their problems solved in a kind of way that more quickly brings the technology to the marketplace. So we're a conduit through to the rest of the university, but also through our own personnel and working with industry partners. And especially for early stage technologies, where we're looking for where is this going to be applied. Industry has great insight into that, and by working with them to apply the early stage technologies to problems they have today, it's a great venue to get the technologies outside of Northeastern and into the wide world. I did want to spend a few minutes talking about SBIR, STTR. For those who are thinking about starting a company, do it now. It is not a difficult task. There are a variety of mechanisms to do it, LLCs, S Corps, C Corps, depending on the risk that you're willing to take, tax advantages to certain types of organizations. But it allows you opportunities to go after SBIRs, STTRs. In the early days, I would say that the program was ill-used by industry. It was a funding mechanism for funding mechanism's sake. That has changed over the past decade or so, and it really is early stage funding that the government organizations apply to promising technologies to solve their technical needs, but also it's really designed to stand up businesses and create that kind of value through these small companies. Instant Eye Robotics that I spoke about at the very beginning, that was a spin out of a larger company. So we had both dilutive and non-dilutive. The dilutive was the initial investment by the parent organization as we spun that out. The non-dilutive is we took an SBIR phase 1 from the Air Force, went to phase 2, went to phase 3. We were in the first class of start funding by Mass Ventures, which is if you have an SBIR phase 2, it is funding by Mass Ventures to commercialize your technology. And there are 3 phases there, but it's really meant to take you to that next level. Phase 1 and phase 2 are non-dilutive. Phase 3, it can be dilutive, but they have other licensing schemes, so it does not necessarily need to be dilutive. But we grew the organization slowly at first. The valley of death is real. The valley of despair, as I like to call it, where you have a great technology, you have some early adopters who are enthusiastic, but they're not buying in quantity. For Instant Eye, what happened is literally over the course of a month, we went from producing these small robotic systems, 2 or 3 a month, to a customer who came in and said, we need at least 200 a month right now. When can you spool up? So the hockey stick kind of revenue profile, we actually lived through that. It sounds great on paper until you realize that you now have supply chain issues, you have inventory to keep track of. Suddenly you go and become a real company. And the advantage that we had, and I will emphasize this, it is the team you put together. As technologists, everybody at Northeastern is a fantastic technologist, got it. But it's all the other things that you need to bring to the table. Who's your finance guy? Who's your marketing person? Who are these other folks that you need to make this successful beyond the technology? And so spending some time to think about the team that you're going to pull together is well worth the effort, because when you do have that sudden success, you're going to want those folks already spooled up, because it's going to happen quickly.
That's great. Thanks, Tom. So we're going to open the question and answer period in a couple of minutes here. Prior to doing so, though, I'd love to speak to team. So great transition, Tom. Randy, I know that you can't see me, but I'm staring at you and you as well. I know that you both had kind of students affiliated with your team to start. And, in some cases that works really well. In other cases, it can be challenging. Randy, I'd love for you to speak to both, because you have had, kind of successful businesses start with some of these students turned alums. And I know you're working on that right now. And while it's going well, there are some challenges affiliated with it too. And so I'd love for you each to kind of speak to what it is that looks like. And then we're going to open the floor for questions and answers. So please feel free to start posting your questions in the chat. I'm going to take them from there shortly. Randy, do you want to begin here?
Sounds good. I'll get us started. The founders of both Fortify and Boston Materials were Northeastern students, student CEOs, as Katie mentioned, and there was a common denominator there, which was that the students were very tenacious, hardworking, overcame challenges. They were also humble. They were ready to learn. They did not have fixed ideas about what the product needed to be, about what the market was. They were ready to listen to the landscape and find where they can get the most or deliver the most value. Those kind of two characteristics, the tenacious, humble, aren't something that you can train, and are super important in my conversations with investors. The broad strokes opinion was that they were investing 50% in the technology, 50% in the people. If you had the wrong type of leadership, someone that had fixed ideas, someone that would not show grit and overcome challenges, then for the most part, there wasn't a good fit there. And in my experience, the two CEO students, Josh Martin at Fortify, Anvesh Gurijala at Boston Materials, really showed that grit and really showed that humbleness, and that is what really brought them success.
That's great. Thanks, Randy. Yi, do you want to speak a bit to how it's going right now, trying to facilitate a potential student CEO and or business lead for Planck Energies?
Sure, yes. So currently, the CEO of Planck Energies is one of my 5 PhD students, Andrew. So when I formed my startup last year, I got I received some suggestions, because I cannot actually run full-time the business, and especially actually to find someone actually who has experience in management. But it's really hard for me as a faculty member. And also another suggestion coming from other engineering faculty funded founders. They said actually why don't you think of your own PhD students, because you try them well, and also you know them really well, and also they know technology really well. So why don't you rely on them? Actually, they can help you to manage the business, and also they can help you develop technology if they want, if they have interest in that. And I have 5 students, and they all have different personalities, different visions and opinions about their own career. So I talked to one of my students, Andrew, and he liked this idea really much. Before he joined Northeastern as a PhD student, he worked full-time, at ASML in Connecticut. So he does have, some experience, at least in doing business. So I just talked to him whether or not he want to help, because we all know actually, at really early stage of startup company, nobody get paid, and sometimes we might need to pay something ourselves out of our own pocket. Even though when we have our business card and print it, actually we also have to to pay our own pocket. We cannot. You cannot charge to a Spark Fund or any other fund at all. So I talked to Andrew, my student, and he said he really like to do that. And also, this is fantastic. If any student actually who really want to do that themselves, not actually under pressure from the supervisor, I believe this can be a good sign, and it can be make a good team. After 1 year, so far, and as I've been working with Andrew, the CEO of the startup, I find out that he has done a fantastic job, brilliant job. Sometimes he helped me a lot, even though I may not have time to do anything, and also I was supposed to do something, but I didn't have time. I have to do research and writing and teaching, proposal writing, paper writing, everything. So student actually, I can simply rely on my student CEO a lot. In the past few months, my company got involved, deeply in a lot of mentorship, training programs, like through the National Clean Tech and the Massachusetts Innovation Network at this event, and also the Northeastern I-Corps training. Without the student CEO or without anyone who can help you, actually, I don't think I could survive. And that is why I highly recommend to faculty member, if you found your company, it's better to find someone who can help you. And to me, actually, my students can do a really good job. And I also have some challenging, working with the student CEO is the student themselves, they are full-time students, they are PhD students. They are not supposed to do anything out of their research work, because actually I pay them as a GRA or GTA, so department, as a PhD student. If you require them to work on something else, particularly in off time, out of time. So how can I address these concerns? So let's say sometimes actually my student and I we need to work on some pitch deck, for some meetings with the VCs, and also maybe to attend some national events. We have to work on that. But the students, they also have some deadline to submit their papers, the revision of their papers. So actually we compromised. Something happened to us just 2 months ago. So Andrew, he had a paper, now it's already got published already. But 2 months ago, the paper, got a major revision by 3 reviewers, and the editor only gave us 2 weeks to address the review comments. How can we do that? And that time actually we worked on a proposal altogether to request some SPR fund. So it's really tough, and we compromised. So at that time, actually, we just put our business as priority. So I sent an email to the editor of the journal and asked extension actually on the reviewer on the revision of our manuscript. It worked really well. We got actually a 4-week extension, and then actually we addressed our review comments really well, and paper also got published, and also we have enough time. We had enough time to work on our business. So this is something actually you need to work well actually with your student, because they are student. They are not actually a full-time employee at all. So this is something you have to think well. So how you're going to work with with the guy who sometimes can be viewed as a student, or sometimes can be viewed as entrepreneur. Maybe just like the principle, like the wave particle duality. Sometimes you have to work with the wave form or particle form, but actually they all share actually the same feature at one time. This is actually something you have to deal with.
Well said. Thank you, Yi. So I'm going to remind everyone that if you have questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat. We did get a question earlier about the NSF I-Core Site program, which I know you just mentioned. I did put a link to the NSF I-Core Site program Northeastern website in the chat for everyone to reference. I've also been in the chat putting links to organizations and or programs that our panelists have mentioned. In the event you want to open those links and refer to them later, please do so. With that said, we have about 8 minutes left. So again, Q&A chat is open for anyone that has specific questions. What I'm going to do for now with the panelists is open the floor to give you an opportunity to share anything that you didn't bring up that you want to be sure everyone has to take away with them today, and or parting words of wisdom specifically around things you wish you knew as you got started with non-dilutive and dilutive funding efforts. So again, there's 1 or 2 things that you can do in these last 8 minutes, panelists. One, either share something that didn't come up that you want to be sure is brought to the table, and or share what you wish you knew as you started this funding adventure, we'll call it. Sarah, do you want to begin?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. I guess I'll tell you something that we've been thinking about as we're trying to shift into. So we formed a company, and we're trying to sort of move in the direction of how do you fund the lab and the company, because companies and labs do work together. We're trying to figure out how to achieve that balance. So part of it is filling out this conflict of interest form to make sure that the 2 entities are kind of separate from each other. But one question that we've had, and we're still trying to figure it out, if you're funding through an STTR, how do you get paid as the PI if you can't be part of the company? Like you can't be part of both, but you're doing the work, you're doing the majority of the work for both. So that's sort of a question that we're trying to answer, working our way through it. I don't know if that's helpful to know, but it is something that we're thinking about actively at the moment.
I think that actively answers things you wish you knew, and you wish you knew right now, which is helpful. Thanks, Sarah. Randy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, it sounds good. One thing that I want to make sure to highlight is on the journey of Fortify and Boston Materials, both past did go through Mass Challenge. Mass Challenge is a local and now global program, an incubator, a non-dilutive incubator that really puts you in touch with a large mentor network. And that network is really critical in the early days to understand path to market. And along those lines, that journey with mentors started at Northeastern, and there's a venture mentor network here at Northeastern that is very strong, and we really heavily utilize, as much as possible. The more mentors you have, the more you think about problems, the better your hypothesis of your product is, and the more insight you have in order to be successful. The venture mentor network here at Northeastern is robust, selfless, and is a real great resource.
That's great. Thanks, Randy. Tom, would you like to go next?
Certainly. So when I was running AV Ventures, I can say that the two things that killed an opportunity quicker than anything else, one was only a passing interest in seeing it through. I look for passion. I can teach almost anything else. I can't teach passion. So when somebody was passionate about what they wanted to do, they were going to see it through. The stick to it that Randy was talking about. You're going to go through long nights, scary moments, all the things that you hear about startups. And if you're not passionate about driving it through to conclusion, you're going to give up. And that's a shame. The other is, and I brought it up before, is the team you put together. I would say without a doubt, some say 50-50 team and technology. I would probably go 70-30, 70 team, 30 technology, because the technology is there. You have to have the team to see it through and all aspects of it. So, and it took a while to learn these things, and it took being on both sides of the equation to figure it out. But have passion for what you're doing, assemble a team to get it done, and there's a high probability of success. Over.
Great, thanks, Tom. And Yi, do you want to share, your final thoughts around what you
Sure.
wish you knew?
Sure, and also I just would like to share actually more funding opportunities with you, because I believe most attendees today actually are interested in funding resources. So like the CRI Spark Fund, and also as a PFI SPRSD programs that we talk about today. I also have some fundings from the Mass Ventures. Mass Ventures actually they do have several funding opportunities, like the Mass Ventures Acorn Innovation Award. That's have up to $16,000 a year. And also Mass Ventures also have other programs like the Catalyst program. I submitted the Catalyst proposal last year. You can also request actually $100,000 for 1 year or two, I guess. And and also you might think of some other fundings from some industry. They also have some non-dilutive funding, like 3M. 3M has an award that's called the NTFA award. 3M non-tenure faculty award. Before you got tenure, actually, you are able to request this funding. 3-year funding. It comes with $45,000 in total, and also similar fundings, from industry like Seagate and DuPont. They all have a similar funding. They're all non-dilutive funding. You could think of like a few months ago, 3-4 months ago, also I received the 3M funding, non-dilutive funding, and I want to highlight is the funding itself is really small size, but through the application procedure, you got a chance to expose your technology to those people. Those people from industry, they have resources. They might either help you to connect you to the potential customers, or they can help you to provide you some suggestions on the industry level manufacturing of your product or prototypes. So is really, really important to me. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Yi. So with that, we have about 2 minutes left. What I'm going to throw in the chat again for everybody's reference. Again, there are lots of links in the chat. Please feel free to open them and ensure that you have them, kind of bookmarked on your computer as we leave the Zoom conversation today. I'm going to throw the GEW link in there one more time, as it is Global Entrepreneurship Week, in the event you want to join more startup-oriented sorts of programming this week. And I'm going to throw the Spark Fund website in here as well, so that you can reference it in the event you want to apply as a faculty member here at Northeastern. in our final last minute here, I want to thank everyone, for joining us today, listening in on this panel. It is recorded, so we will get this recording to you and to those who couldn't join us live virtually. And want to thank all of our panelists, Randy, Sarah, Tom Yee. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights. With that, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording and wish everybody well on this Monday afternoon now.
Thank you, Katie.